It would be October this year. It was cold. How cold was it, Johnny? It was so cold that they replaced the fig leaf under the Atlas statue with a Bunsen burner. If you remember Johnny Carson, you will remember that joke. Otherwise, you'll just chalk it up to some distant memory. Well, thank you for coming. We're going to do, I think, an interesting panel. I know we have quite a few filmmakers here who will want to weigh in with questions or comments and all of that. So I think we could really illuminate our subject today. And what is the subject, you might ask? Well, I've always wanted to be a headline writer for the New York Post, so we're titling this, How to Get Your Film Sold, What's Happening in Distribution. So here is, before I introduce our esteemed guest, I'll give you my background very quickly because it's pertinent. I worked for 25 years at Disney in television and film distribution. I started in 1988, the year that Nancy founded her company, Zeitgeist Films. Okay, in 1988, what did we do to distribute stuff? Well, we would take our series around to TV stations. And at that time, there were many individual TV stations. They weren't as aggregated or agglomerated as they are now. So we would go from market to market, hope that they would buy a show like The Golden Girls, one of my favorite shows. Or they would buy, we had a program called Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, please buy my show. Or we had Siskel and Ebert, please buy my show. But you would go basically door to door, market to market, and try and get stuff done. HBO was founded in 1989 or 79, I think. I think it went up on the bird in either 1980 or 81, along with ESPN. And so satellite distribution changed things quite a bit. But really, even until the late 80s, distribution was quite a slog. It was very analog. So the idea that, without tracing it through the years and boring all of you, is that we've come to a point now where the modes of distribution are so myriad and they're so diverse that I thought it was important for us to have a panel here today that would sort of get at, from the producing side, what are the choices that producers make if they're going to get behind a film? How do they see the marketplace? And from the acquisition side, what are acquirers looking for exactly? What are the deals that are getting made? And I know that some of you have some opinions about other modes of distribution that may be more suitable in today's marketplace than even iTunes, or now that Apple is getting into the business, or Netflix, or Hulu, or Amazon. There are other things that are cropping up which could be more valuable than sort of the so-called big ticket, over-the-top digital streaming platforms. Let me introduce our panelists. Nancy Gerstman, to my far right, co-president and co-founder of Zeitgeist Films. She has worked in all aspects of film distribution and exhibition and is in demand as a juror, panelist, and commentator on issues related to independent and foreign language film. Nancy is permanent artist in residence in the master's program in media and communication arts at City College of New York. And she was born in the fabulous, fabulous borough of Queens, where my wife and I lived for years, and I'm very fond of Queens, New York. If you would please give Nancy a hand for coming out. Now, Beth, this is in smaller type, so it will take me a little longer. Okay, well, you'll cut me off where you'd like. Beth Levison is an independent producer and director and the recipient of 2 National Emmy Awards and 3 Peabody Awards. She recently completed the 2017 feature-length documentary 32 Pills, My Sister's Suicide, which many of us just saw and are still talking about the life, mental illness, and tragic suicide of New York artist and photographer Ruth Litoff, directed by the surviving sister, Hope Litoff. Let's skip ahead. This film was acquired by HBO, and we'll want to talk about that today. And we'll broadcast nationally and internationally in 2018. Prior to this, she has produced The Trials of Spring, which is a cross-media project including a feature-length documentary and 6 shorts created in partnership with the NewYorkTimes.com about women human rights activists in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Syria, Bahrain, and Yemen. And the film is slated to premiere on PBS also in 2018. Let's see. Let's go to, Beth got her start in television working for HBO, PBS, Sundance Channel, and other broadcasters. She's based in New York City. She's a founder of the Documentary Producers Alliance, which we will talk about, producing faculty with the MFA program in Social Documentary Film at the School of Visual Arts, SVA. Many of you know about SVA. She's the owner of Early Bird Films and, most importantly, a mom to 2 boys. Please welcome Beth Levison. So having set this up as we have perhaps contrasting points of view coming from this in 2 ways, Nancy, I would like to start with you by asking first to give us a sort of a, not chronological, but a perspective from when you started and what you were looking at then to where we are now, what you were looking at now. Tell us if this has actually radically changed, or you are staying true to some core commitments about the type of films you were looking for and then the kind of deals you want to do.
Well, in terms of what we're looking for, I mean, we are looking...
Is it on? There might be a flip switch. Go on the shaft right there, I think.
It's on?
Okay.
In terms of what we're looking for, I don't think that's really changed all that much, because my business partner and I started the company with a desire to find films that we were very passionate about. Actually, passionate is a word that people really use too much in our industry, but it does express, how we felt about our films. And we wanted to concentrate on very few films a year in relation to what other people were concentrating on, and be able to do the best possible job with those films. So we had decided that we were only going to take 5 or 6 films a year, and we would distribute them. At the time, really, there was hardly even DVD distribution. Certainly we didn't have a DVD division. And so we decided that we would do them theatrically and also educationally. So the fact is, the types of films that we were looking for were, at the time, American independent and documentary films, narrative and documentaries. And after we had our first success, the narrative, which was the film Poison by Todd Haynes, which did so incredibly well, it became almost impossible for us to pick up American independent films. They became just too expensive, and a few companies came, into the market, and it just became impossible. And so we really switched over to foreign language films, which became very successful for us, but we were still doing American documentaries. So, that's something that we really started doing and that we've been committed to doing all of these years. We could have taken on more films. We had a much bigger staff at one point. First, when we first started, it was just Emily and me. But then at a certain point, we had 10 more people. But we really decided that although we added a DVD division and we added a digital division, that 5 or 6 still were going to be the amount of films that we did, because otherwise they were just going to get lost in the shuffle and we were not going to be able to do the best possible job on them.
Thank you. Let me go to Beth now with a question about how, as a producer, you make choices to align yourself, involve yourself with films that you are anticipating will be viable commercially or not. What is the balance between the projects that you take on for that reason and the ones that you sort of, as a passion project, look to as well? How does one influence the other in terms of the choice structure that you have?
I think it's a really good question. I'm going to lean into what Rose just said, but I mean, first you have to be passionate about a film. So that really just resonated, what you said, because the business is too hard and not lucrative enough to do it if you're not passionate. And I think that also, so for me, I think that I choose to produce projects that I think will be successful. And when you kind of introduced us, at first you said opposing points of view. I think we share. We want to produce films and bring films that will do well in the market. So I'm always thinking about that. But some films I know are going to be more commercially successful, and will do better in the marketplace than others. And at that point, it becomes a reckoning, kind of, well, what can I afford to do? What can I manage? Because I know that maybe this film can sort of, you know, because this is a business for us, so it can help pay my bills, and maybe by doing this film, it will allow me to do this film. But I do have, I mean, I think there, as a producer, I'm always going into it with that calculus, and I really choose to produce projects that I think will sell, because whether that is to PBS or that is to HBO or that is to Netflix, that is my goal as a producer, because I want my films to be seen. So I choose those films, I think, have the team behind them to be strong enough, that address, that have the craft behind them, that they will be well enough made to be successful, and that are done, you know, that are addressing themes or portraying a character or a situation in a way that then broadcasters or distributors will want it.
We are in an era, I think, of ascendance for documentaries. You have said, Nancy, that your company's focus has come back to the documentary film, maybe because of affordability, but I also think now there's an overlay with the popularity of documentaries. They're experiencing a transcendent moment. Hopefully it will last for a long time. So do you fear that the affordability of documentaries will be difficult for you, as it happened with narrative, that something is going to, it's just going to scale up, and you will, you know, it'll present problems for you?
That's an interesting question, because when I say that we switched out of American indies in terms of narratives, that was sort of a moment. You know, we really had the opportunity to have so many amazing American independent films in the beginning of the 90s, and then all of a sudden a lot of companies came in, and a lot of new companies came in and were acquiring those types of films. I would say now, if we really wanted to acquire American independent films, we probably would not have that much trouble. But we had decided that we were going to really concentrate on foreign language films and documentaries. And I think there's always a lot of competition. There's more and more competition. You're always going to have people after the types of films that you're after. We have wonderful documentaries, and we're acquiring wonderful documentaries, but we are fighting tooth and nail for them. So it's just the way it is. And now we have a little more ability to acquire them because we have a new partner who's allowing us to really put up larger minimum guarantees. So we have a little bit more wiggle room to be able to compete.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now, you want to jump?
No.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to keep up. One of the identifiers in Beth's notes that we read was her founding of our association with the Documentary Producers Alliance, which I think we could safely describe as a group dedicated to perhaps getting real deals for documentary producer and directors and producers out there. In other words, trying to galvanize around the idea of really getting paid for the work. And so if you would talk a little bit about the mission of DPA and how it maybe impacts a lot of the doc filmmakers here. Want to switch it around?
Oh.
Switch it around.
Okay.
You are welcome.
So, yeah, is that now too hot?
Well.
That's good?
2 thumbs up in the back.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So the Documentary Producers Alliance, actually, so we founded ourselves in January of 2016, and we were founded by we were 6 producers, and our goal is to advocate on behalf of producers, because there is no organization out there right now advocating on behalf of documentary producers. but also on behalf of the sustainability, the diversity, and the health of the documentary industry as a whole. So basically, our feeling is that as documentary producers, we are often the first ones on, the deepest ones in, and the last ones off of a project. We know deeply what's going on with our own projects, and we're also the ones that liaise with the outside world. And so we have this vantage point where we can really see what's working and what's not, in ways that can help producers and that can help the field as a whole. So one of the things that we are working towards is not just producers being compensated, but really recognized for the work that we do, and to also educate what producers do, because I don't think it's well understood. But with that, and as we put ourselves out into the world, we've gotten some feedback. Well, you know, as producers, you have a responsibility too. Like, you may argue you need to be recognized and you need to be acknowledged and you need to be paid. But some people believe that we are also responsible for the choices that we make, which we are. So, you know, it's so the alliance is really about how can we make the industry better, and that's from the beginning of the process and through the end and through distribution. And it's also recognizing that we as producers have a role in that based on the projects that we choose to push forward and advocate for.
I read just the other day, maybe it was today, the days are running together, but I have noted that there are massive budgets coming into play at Netflix. I believe $7 billion has been set aside for acquisitions for 2018. Amazon is setting aside $4.5 billion. This was Apple is entering in a big way. We're not sure what the content that they will acquire, what direction that will go in. I'm even reading that Snapchat wants to do content acquisition. In light of the huge sums that are being set aside for original content, how do you sort of react to that in terms of getting fair share? And also on your end, does it create real intimidation problems because the entities are just loading up and they're willing to outbid at any price? And so it makes it harder for you, I think, to get the deals done, perhaps for the pictures you want. Either of you can jump in on this, but the industry is radically going into large-scale sort of deals.
Well, I mean, that's a hell of a question, because in a lot of ways, Netflix doing original content is kicking out a lot of the content that we were selling to them. So that's a huge problem. I mean, you know, just to give a little context, Netflix used to buy all of our films. You know, we used to have an output deal with Netflix, so they bought everything. They bought hard discs, and they did streaming of our films. And then little by little, they were getting choosier and choosier and choosier and choosier, to the point where they became so choosy that, you know, they were taking hardly any of our films. And then some of the films that they had bought previously, which people were still asking for, they were not renewing, which was very frustrating. So Netflix, I mean, they're wonderful in a certain way, because if they're interested in something, then they will give you some money, and that's good money to acquire. But most of the times they are not very interested, especially these days. And, you know, we're talking about Amazon also.
And I respond to what you said in a very different way, in some ways, because I don't, you know, they may be putting us up large sums of money, but I'm not seeing it. And I'm still seeing filmmakers who are struggling to make films for unrealistic budgets. I'm still seeing funders who are, you know, well, why is this film costing that much? Couldn't it cost this much? So I'm still seeing documentary filmmakers struggle tooth and nail to make their films, meet their budgets, find ways to make them for budgets that aren't realistic. And I'm still seeing filmmakers bearing too much of the risk. So that yes, we now have an industry and there's a demand for documentary films, but I think that documentary filmmakers, by and large, are not profiting commensurately. And I think that that's a real problem. And one of the things that we're really advocating for is like real budgets.
What does that mean? Tell us what you think the range of real is.
I think that most independent films, probably like a feature-length film, cost about $1 million to make. I think you can make films for much less than that, and I'm producing a film that's less than half that budget. But I think for the values that Netflix wants or that Amazon wants for these high production value films, it costs money to make them. And so filmmakers, we're a very resilient, resourceful bunch, and we find ways to make them for far, far less. I made my first film for a quarter of that. So we find ways, but again, I think that I'm advocating for a little less struggle for filmmakers. I think it would be good for everybody.
Go ahead.
When you say you're looking for ways for filmmakers to have less of a struggle, are you looking towards partner scale or more independence?
Well, for example, I mean,
The question had to do with are you looking for large scale support or more independent support when you're making films? Okay.
well, for example, right now, there's basically, one fund out there that gives development funds to documentary films. It's Catapult. So maybe you know how to get discretionary funds. Like maybe you know a funder and you have a way in and you can get some development funding because you know somebody. Or maybe you do get lucky and you get a first look deal with somebody like HBO or CNN, but you have to have the relationship. And what about younger filmmakers, diverse voices, people who don't necessarily have an in yet? What about development funds? Like right now, the bulk of funding for documentary films comes in at rough cut. Do you know how much money it takes to get to rough cut? So it creates an incredible burden for filmmakers. So one thing I'm really advocating for, just as a human, as Beth Levison, is what if we shift the funding model? So ITVS just announced that they are going to do development funds for diverse voices, which is great. But we're still only talking about 30 films between Catapult and ITVS that are benefiting. So what about more development funds? Like that's just an easy solution. It's a shift. Lots of people are wanting in on documentaries. Okay, we want you too. We want you to come in. Please come in earlier. Share the risk with filmmakers. Help us get to the next stage sooner and better.
So who are some of the entities that you would pitch to come in earlier who have substantial funding potential? You can name names. Go ahead.
I'm working on it,
Okay.
and I don't want to name names,
Okay.
but it's something that I'm actively working on.
Okay.
And and there are now investors coming into the space, and lots of investors come into the space actually knowing that they might not recoup their investment. We have in technology, there are angel investors. What about angel investors in documentary? People coming in, and of course, it has to be a good project, it has to be well conceived, it has to be professionally developed, it has to have a good team behind it. So, all those pieces need to be in place, but what if we could kind of shift the paradigm a little bit? Because the distribution paradigm has changed so much. I think that the production paradigm has to change a little bit too.
Okay. Yes, Thomas. Do you need a microphone, or can you project? Take that. You'll project.
Just curious if you could tell us what looking good in the marketplace is to you now. I know every project's so different, but a good project in iTunes or in the market, I'd love to hear what you think about that. And I'd like to know if you're considering creating your own end game. Because right now, if you go to iTunes or Netflix, the likelihood of someone finding your film there is still very low. And once you get on iTunes, they'll say, well, if you're not promoting, no one's going to see you. So have you ever considered, creating your own documentary iTunes or something like that? Control the market of your own.
I have no interest in that. I mean, I like to make films, and I feel like people have tried that, and people are doing that. So I feel like that is not in my area of expertise. I think it takes tremendous expertise. And I actually want to say, when I say that $1 million number, it also has to do with marketing your film and getting your film out there and putting resources behind it. I'm not just talking about the budget. You know, a budget to just get your film made is not enough of a budget, because you do have to market your film. You do have to put resources into it to get it out into the world. So about the platform, no, I'm not. It wouldn't be the right job for me. And the first question was.
You said success in the marketplace. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, success in the marketplace for me, I think every film has its own different measure of success, and every filmmaker has their own measure of success. So, but for me, I just want to see if, some films have tremendous outreach and impact lives, and they are never broadcast. And yet, like that one about the bag, what's that film? Bag It. Yeah, I mean that film has had a tremendous life and a tremendous impact, and you know, and I think it has done well. It has allowed the filmmaker to sustain him or herself. So I think actually a measure of success, it's a good question. I'm interested in films that get to market in some way, whether it's through outreach and impact and community screenings. But for me, a measure of success is, can the filmmaker sustain him or herself?
Financially.
Yes. Yeah.
Can we talk for a moment about hybrid approaches where, as we go through various windows of distribution, there's more than one place to sell one's film, to distribute one's film? Does anybody, perhaps you folks or in the audience, want to comment on PBS Plus or Netflix Plus, exclusivity versus non-exclusivity? Because often it's going to take more than one platform to generate enough funding to get into the black, if you will, on films. Does anybody, do you all want to take a shot at that?
Well,
and then we'll
I'm just
go?
wondering whether anybody has really done that in the audience, you know, whether you've really divided up your rights and, fast forward.
Battery's dead.
Battery died?
Battery died.
Well, we are now a one mic family.
I mean, I would really be interested to know whether anybody has done this, or whether they've had some sort of rights, you know, sale outside of the United States or outside of North America. Oh yes, Alex. Yeah, Alex, of course. Yeah.
Just go up there.
Now a four-member family.
All right, see if this works. Can everyone hear me? All right. I'm Alex Dean. Nancy actually is distributing one of my films right now. And that film called Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story. Tonight at 7:15. I just came up because when Nancy asked that, that's what I did with Bombshell. So what I did with Bombshell was have a conversation with PBS when we were starting to fund the film, which went along the lines of, I don't think the model that's going on right now works for filmmakers. We have to do something new. And as it happened, the team that was making Norman Lear had the same conversation with them at the same time. And both of us were working with American Masters. So that was one particular place at PBS. But that's an important place for, can you hear? American Masters is important for filmmakers because you can guarantee maybe over 1 million eyeballs on your first showing there. So you can go out and get the nut of the rest of your funding based on that 1 million plus if you can get them to get on board early. Problem is you have to give them a lot of rights for them to get on early, right? And what you want to negotiate is a license rather than they own everything. And they have for a long time owned everything by coming on early, and they expect to. And they're in, an august institution. It's hard to say, actually, I think the model's changed a little bit. We need a few more rights. This is really important to us. And it was really hard for me. It was the first time I'd done that. But in the end, we managed to negotiate. We kept international rights. We actually put some money up ourselves to guard the international rights, and digital rights stayed within our purview. And American Masters invested towards our digital rights and gave us a license fee to help us fund the film. And as a result, we were able to go to Zeitgeist, even though we had from the beginning been funded by American Masters, and get a theatrical release. We were able to get partners across the globe. We were with Mad Men in Australia, Dogwolf in England, basically every carved up international territory we are making a partnership with. And it's not a huge film. I'm not going to say we're printing money, but we are definitely able to pay all the bills and then some this way. So I hope this model will continue. I hope other people will go forward and negotiate from the beginning with outlets and see if we can't make that a business model going forward.
Okay. Question?
Yeah. So how would you even know to do that? I mean, basically what I heard was like an MBA dissertation. It's like, so like an independent filmmaking, is quite often a 1, 2, 3-person shop, where you're really just trying to, at least in my case, like for 10 years, just keep the train going down the tracks. It's like you're pushing this locomotive, and as soon as you stop, you'll never get it started again.
Yeah.
So it's like that. It sounds like some incredible savvy, and I've heard of other people doing similar things, and I'm just wondering, A, how did you know how to do it? B, what are the type of people that you'd like to partner with that can help you even navigate this whole other world of dialogue? Really, it's a completely different world of dialogue.
Has everybody heard Sean's question or his lament?
Yeah.
Yes. Please do. He's asking you directly.
The question is, how do you know how to do that, and how do you keep the trains running on time when you've got so much to deal with already in a production shop, and you've got to deal with this sort of complicated business model? I don't have a total answer for you. I mean, we struggle just as much as you to keep the trains going. The partial answer is, I came from in-house at PBS, so I had a relationship with them producing in-house.
Hence.
Yeah, that's 10 years of working as a lackey.
Because when I heard you say that you opened a dialogue, I'm like, I can't even get people like a tenth of PBS to return an email, much less open a dialogue. No, but it's not the only place I've tried to open a dialogue. Having had that relationship with PBS, I did then go to HBO and try and open that dialogue there. And that really meant just trying to form relationships with people there, going to events like this, going up and meeting people on podiums, going to Real Screen. Has anyone here been to Real Screen? That's the industry conference in January often. It's worth putting a little bit of money into that and going up and meeting all the people who are commissioning editors at A&E, at Discovery, and just putting your hand out and giving them your business card and saying, can we have a meeting? Can we have a pitch meeting? I've got 5 or 6 ideas. You might like one of them. I'm a new company, this is an exciting company, just selling yourself there, and you are paying a ticket to go to Real Screen to have that moment, that chance, that 5 seconds with somebody. And last year that did result in about 6 meetings for our company at various different places like Discovery, A&E, HBO. So I do recommend people, the ticket price is steep, you think it's about $1,000, you think that's crazy, I can't afford that at all. But it really is worth it if that's 5 or 6 auditions with somebody who can pay for your whole film.
I guess. I guess that I would add also that unfortunately the business of filmmaking is not just about making the film. You know what I mean? Like it really, like creatively. And it is, so when you say like, how did you even know that? Like it is researching, it is going to panel discussions, it is educating yourself. If you are so in the weeds making your film, I mean, so that is a place where like a producer can help you. Right now the conversation really is, what rights can you carve up so that the life of the filmmaker can be better sustained? So that, and I do feel like, so we just sold our film to HBO. HBO did not come in with a lot of money. They recognized that, and so they allowed us to retain a lot of our rights. and they also took they only took a 2-year window, which means we can resell the film after 2 years. So it's educating yourself, it's that whole thing of like hustling, and it's not just real screen, it's like if you have a film, go to the effort of having a strong deck, like a good proposal with images and a visual deck, or make a trailer and submit to IFP. Is yours a documentary or is it a feature?
It's a documentary that's competing with yours. Tonight it's at 15.
Okay, so you know the drill. You know the drill. It's IFP. It's Hot Docs in Canada. It's the pitch forums. It's the meeting forums, and if it's not a producer that you can find, is there a sales agent who can come on board who can help you? So I feel like there are a lot of people in the industry that, talk to Peter Broderick. Well, I'm sure.
But although he's a nice guy, he's a great guy. Yeah, he can have some ideas. We can talk about that later. I also just want to mention that, our business is a relationship business in so many different ways. I mean, not just this, question that you're asking, but, my relationships with people, my relationships with my exhibitors, my relationships with filmmakers, and, it's endless, really. And so just going to somewhere like this, I don't usually go to I don't usually go to regional film festivals. I found myself this year going, but usually I go to markets. But now I am here, going to regional film festivals, and I'm seeing movies. And it's important to meet people, distributors. I don't set myself up as the greatest person you'll ever meet, but I just would say that it's important to know somebody like me. It's important to schmooze when you're at a film festival, to meet people, to meet other filmmakers. It's always useful to do just about anything that you do at a film festival. So,
well, a couple of things have come out. One, should a documentary filmmaker get involved with a producer early on, and by extension, should a director start talking to distributors even before the film is finished, so that there is some interest created based on where it's going before it's done?
Well, in Zeitgeist world, no, you would not.
Is it unrealistic to even suggest that?
In our universe, I don't think, we look at finished films only, and I think a lot of smaller companies only look at finished films. But, certainly there are people who want to know about a work in progress. I won't totally discourage you. I'll discourage you from doing it, with Zeitgeist, but I won't discourage you from doing it with anybody else. It's a little bit of a slippery slope, I would say. Mm-hmm. We're a full-service distributor, even though we have taken on a few films without television rights, because, we feel like we can really do a lot, even if we don't have the TV rights, and, the filmmaker really wants to have that, and TV is difficult for us. So, we don't really encourage people to, sell their rights separately. It's a hard road, it really is. You're doing things that, you may really not know anything about, and you may be selling your rights to somebody who also really doesn't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, with enough research, really looking into things, talking to other people, you can really do just about anything. So I'm trying not to discourage you, I'm just saying that this is really what we do.
I had a conversation with Thomas earlier today about some alternative models, and I'd like you to give voice to that if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Project all that.
You can project through that.
All right, hello. My film's tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I've been learning a lot about this business by making my first film. I didn't go to film school, and like you, just to get this thing done was like everything I had for
The
12.
film is called One Big Home.
But that's not me belly aching, that's just saying there are different types of filmmakers, right? People who are commissioned by HBO to go and shoot for a year and cut a film, more power to them. But what I've been finding is that no one could kind of tell me the right way. And I hired a really great distribution consultant, a guy named Brian Newman, you guys probably know. And he really helped, for an hourly rate, hold my hand through the process. And we decided to divide my rights up. And you know, I've had so many filmmaker friends that have made no money. Someone, I don't want to name names, but her film was reviewed in the New York Times. It played all over New York, LA. And her distributor said, you know, we made $300K at the box office. She won't see a penny of that because of the distributor's costs, the bookers, all that stuff. And so,
can you give us an idea of where the money goes that doesn't go into the filmmaker's pocket?
That's a question for you. I know that for me, you know, when people say it's hard work, like it is hard work, right? But I used to be a carpenter. Hard work is putting a ladder up against that house and carrying shingles up on a ladder for 8 hours. So this hard work is different. It's mentally draining. And so when I got approached by distributors for my films, I actually read the contracts and I was like, wait a minute. So you're going to give me to iTunes, which initially really excited me. iTunes. I've made it. But I looked at the fine print, I'm like, so you have to go through an aggregator, which I didn't know what an aggregator was, but basically it's another middleman. So when iTunes, you buy my film on iTunes, they take 30%. Of that 70%, the aggregator gets 30, correct me if I'm wrong, the distributor gets another 20 or 30. Everything's negotiable, but so roughly these are rough, rough terms. There's a platform, I'm not trying to, you know, be difficult, I'm just trying to keep it real. Vimeo gives the filmmaker 90%, so that's a new development for all of us. It's really incredible. And every day I get an email, you made a sale. Today you made a bunch of sales. We don't want to email you that many times. It's really exciting. And you go to their website and you see the amount of money you've made that week. Really profound. I still will do iTunes because Brian Newman consulted me. No one knows who Vimeo is. They're too new of a platform. But for filmmakers, they are friendly. And then there's another way where I did a limited theatrical. I couldn't afford a Brahmarama. I raised some money and got Ken Eisen from Shadow. And he's a great guy. But when I got the numbers back, even though there was 4 theaters in LA, it was like, oh, 50 people came. 30 people came. Jeez, I mean, that's like... But then I hired Film Sprout, which is a really amazing group of powerful young women in New York. And what they do is you hire them. So per your $1 million model, this is something I hadn't thought about when I was making my film, but I went out and raised it because they're such a reputable company. So you pay these women $50,000 for 6 months, and they get your film all over the country, and you get all the profits. So my friend Dawn Porter made a film on abortion, and you know, she made money back from Film Sprout. I won't make money. My film hasn't made enough to make it back, but I've made a bunch back. More importantly, this is my long-winded point, is to your point of defining success differently. I realized last week in Jamestown, Rhode Island, when, you know, our Q&A, and then in the parking lot, people coming up to me to tell me their stories. As I was driving back, I said, that's why I made this film, to connect with people and to inspire people to take action. So I'm defining success differently. When Sundance said no, and, you know, Tribeca said no, and Full Frame, I was brokenhearted, but I'm kind of buoyed by this connecting with people. And so my long-winded point is that I think we have to work together because we have the goods. We've worked hard to make the documentaries. You work hard to get them out into the world, and we're both being, I think, short-sighted and not working together and creating our own way to really profitize the really incredible content we have.
Thank you. Who has questions? I'm suspecting there are questions out there. Or further comments, yes.
Okay, so how does a young female filmmaker get into the business who's made a documentary on less than $25,000, that's getting awards and is getting, you know, interest from PBS and other places, and doesn't have the money to hire these consultants? Where does she go?
So you have been at film festivals other than this one, or are you going to? You're in the festival.
Yes.
You're in the festival. Okay.
Kasha.
All right. And so you've applied to other festivals.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Have you been accepted to any other festivals? So where are you going to be going?
Barnes in England, a couple in Canada, and about 5 more in the States right now. But that's from about a quarter of the ones that we've heard.
Okay, so you've applied to a lot. All right. Okay.
Waivers are my best friend.
Right. I see. Okay. Just if you don't mind, what's the film about?
So I'll give you the short, I guess. It's called The
You may want to stand up
Yeah.
or come up and use our family of mics.
This is right. We're doing the whole thing here. Okay.
So the film is called The Sunrise Storyteller, and basically, oops, sorry.
Yeah, keep it.
I think it's that speaker, actually, if you're in front of the speaker.
Oh, okay. Well, I took a year out of high school to travel to East Africa and Southeast Asia to document the ways people are overcoming adversity in their communities, covering issues like peace, gender equality, education, and I kind of traveled out there to learn what it means to be a global citizen, so you get a little bit of my narration, but this is on their stories. So it's a feature-length documentary, 64 minutes. And it's yeah.
Well, I have a couple of things to say about that. Just so you know, 64 inches, 64 minutes would be a short film. Yeah, it's really to play in a theater. It really needs to be like 75 minutes. Theaters really find it hard to book a film that's less than 75. However, good news, which, because your film sounds extremely interesting, you have the, potential to show it to non-theatrical distributors, educational distributors. Have you had that at all?
Well, I'm developing a toolkit for high school students. So
Right.
I do educational impact and outreach as something for my
Yeah. I mean, there are some really good ones out there, and I'm sure they'd be really interested in looking at your film. And what we've heard before about impact, people who do these impact, campaigns. Gather is one of the places that does this. They have screenings all over the country, and you don't have to pay them $50,000, which really is quite a lot of money for anybody. But it's really. You really need to look into non-theatrical distributors who are out there. There are at least, especially people like Women Make Movies, because you are a woman after all, and they should be supporting you. And then the other place that you could look, which is very, very interesting and does a very good job with individual educational films, is Canopy, Kanopy, a company that was founded by a woman, an Australian woman, but has done an incredible job in the United States. We love them, so I would really try them too. Sure.
The other thing is that I would just add is that if you are at, what did you say, 64 minutes?
It's 64, yeah.
So basically, like a broadcast length is like 56. It might be 53. It might be 58. So if you were to approach, kind of really look at what's out there and might your film fit for these different, whether it's POV or whatever it might be, but getting it to them and saying you can do a cut down. And also if you are thinking about it for classrooms, teachers really like films that are classroom length. So 64, so lots of times when you're doing educational, you want to do a cut down so that it's for classroom use. So maybe it's like even if you can get it down to below and under an hour, but I've always heard from educators that over an hour makes it really tough for them because their class isn't an hour long.
Well, there's easily, the credits are probably 5, 6 minutes long, so that
You can do it.
yeah.
You can,
Yeah, people are always doing it.
We're coming near to the end of our time. I do want to ask one more question of you both, and this may be a little bit out of bounds, but short films are important to our festival. Short filmmakers are often despairing of what comes next for their film. We have, I think, an outstanding collection of short filmmakers. We love them. Is there life after festivals for shorts, or is there no life? Is it just a calling card for a feature? Help us understand.
So I'm just gonna, I love short films, and I feel like short films can be some of the most powerful films, even if we're talking about a 3-minute or an 8-minute or a 12-minute film, because people have time to watch them. And through YouTube or through Vimeo, I always think about what Casey Neistat says. He goes straight to YouTube because, he's Casey, but he wasn't always Casey. He said, why would I go anywhere else? I have the largest audience in the world. So you can, so I love short films. And yet, I think but I'm not expert, but I do think things are sort of changing. Like one thing that I thought was so interesting this year is that POV took Joe's Violin, which was like a 12-minute film that was nominated for an Academy Award, and it's going to be on POV. And I just thought that signaled something of a sea change, because if anybody is rigid, PBS is rigid, or not rigid, but like they're less flexible. So anyway, I'm going to let you take that.
I don't have a whole lot to say about shorts because, we don't really take shorts. It's not really possible for, since we really still have a very theatrical model, we really have not, and actually even though we do, other platforms, we just start theatrically, so we really were never able to release short films theatrically. I love them too, and actually I thought that the ones that I've seen here have been absolutely incredible. I mean, really, some of the best I've seen in a really long time. But, as far as, and so many festivals play them. And so, of course, they are, not only wonderful, they are wonderful calling cards, but, often they're the first types of films that people make, and then they go on to features, which is, really, I have admired a lot of the shorts and the features that come from them, but I don't have a lot of advice about that. Obviously the internet must have changed that, but I just don't really understand necessarily how it has, so somebody else really needs to speak to that.
Well, the one thing I would say, I'm happy to go to the audience, but last year we featured Lindsay Krause from the New York Times, who oversees their OpDocs program. OpDocs is a powerful platform. Obviously it has the New York Times moniker on it, but one would hope that there might be more, perhaps it's through print journalism, that the Times would set in motion replications of this model, which is another way, and that involves both established filmmakers and new filmmakers at OpDocs. So I can't say that it's being replicated elsewhere by other organizations that are based in print, but I'd like to see that. What's that? The Atlantic magazine also is doing something comparable. So there may be some movement in this direction. We're certainly not here to discourage, but I also think that there needs to be much more movement to get short films exposed. I just have to poll my audiences here, and they will tell you how much they appreciate and adore short films. Unlike other festivals, most festivals, we do not stack our shorts and put them over to the side. We put them in front of our features so that people can, if they're coming for a feature, which is usually their driver, they're able to get access to short films that often really wake them up. So I know how much impact there is with short films. Hello, please finish. It's hard to compete. If anybody would like to make a final comment about shorts, distribution of shorts through personal experience, please step forward. That's fine. I don't want to end on a discouraging note, but I personally would like to see much more done for short films.
A lot of people watch short films on Vimeo.
A vote for Vimeo.
Vimeo's great. I just want to actually make one overall comment, since this is a distribution panel, and really is my role as when I'm producing films is to be a realist and to help the director, like what can really happen, what can this film do, and what can you do with this film? That's really my goal. And so I think Heidi? Alex. So Alex, you talked about how you really carved up all your rights, and you're selling everything, or you're doing everything individually. And Tommy, it sounds like you're sort of doing that too. And and like with my current film, we sold it to HBO, but we retained educational, and we are selling internationally. But one thing that I just want to say is, you can only do what you can at the same time. So for example, my first film, we were so tapped out financially and emotionally by the time it was done. We got a very small distributor, and we just said, take all of it. We just couldn't do anymore. We just couldn't. To carve up all your rights, or to self-distribute, or to do, there are lots of things you can take onto yourself to do, and in an ideal world, yes, you could do all of them, but we're not living in an ideal world, and I just want to say it's okay to do what you can do. And we felt like with my film Lemon, it was incredibly successful. It aired on PBS, and we had, and it went to Netflix, and it went to iTunes, and we had an outreach campaign that was incredibly satisfying. It was small, we didn't reach millions, but the people that we reached, it was totally amazing and life-changing for us, and it emboldened us to make our next film. And so I just want to say, like, every case is unique, and I would just say, like, do what you really can, and identify what success is for you, and go for that. But to be realistic is also to be okay, is okay.
So I want to thank our panelists, Nancy and Beth, for going deep today and for giving us more than the sort of standard answers. Thank you all for coming.